Welcome to Intelligent Artifice, the podcast that helps you become a 10x performance marketer. Intelligent Artifice explores the cutting edge of the intersection of AI, creatives, and performance marketing. Every week, we deconstruct the ad systems behind high performing advertisers using our in house semantic analysis system, BruteForce.ai, or we sit down with top operators redefining how advertising gets done in a generative AI world. Whether you're scaling user acquisition, leading a creative team, or building a creative engine with AI, this podcast is your unfair advantage. Intelligent Artifice is hosted by me, Shamant Rao, the founder and CEO of the boutique growth marketing agency Rocketship HQ. You can find out more about us at rocketshiphq.com. Our services are ideal for advertisers spending over $50,000 a month on paid social. Check out the podcast website, intelligentartifice.net, or our newsletter, intelligentartifice.kit.com. Our guest today is Karen Levy Atias, Senior Director and Head of Creatives at Supersonic Studios, where she leads high-performing creative teams. Today, Karen joins us to share insights on how AI is radically altering creative strategy for high-volume creative production games. I'm very excited to welcome Karen Levy Atias to Intelligent Artifice. Karen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Shaman. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you because I know we were talking before recording. You've had a whirlwind last couple of weeks traveling the world for work, as people wonder. And we had to make the scheduling work, and I'm glad we were able to do it. I'm excited to have you because I think you work on creative strategy at massive scale for hit games, and there's so much that you do that I'm excited to learn from and share for people. Let's start by talking about the shift in your work over the last couple of years. So your team shifted from hyper casual to hybrid over the last couple of years. What were some of the biggest creative shifts that you noticed as your team made this shift?
I think this changes and shifts that we're all talking about is happening for a while. And it's not only that we need this hybrid game to do this change inside your creative production, but it's something that is changing in the industry. And it's a combination. Of course, it's the hybrid games that we're all seeing the industry going to. So games that are generating more revenues from IAP and then having a 50-50 model of IAA, IAP is making us have this change because we're in a need for different users and we need to talk and speak and drive different users into those type of games. And it's not only those users that will play X amount of time in a game and will see X amount of ads and then we'll be completely okay and the ROAS will be 100% after 30 days. It's not the case. And we're seeing much slower curves. Our return takes a while, but the users stay for longer. And we're seeing this shift also in hyper games that are trying to become hybrid. So if you had a really big hit in the hyper casual industry in the past, and we know a few that we still see them in the top charts, we are seeing that their monetization strategy is also shifting there. And then they have to shift their strategy of ads as well. And the way it's impacting the creative teams is the way we strategize our creatives and the way we are approaching what should I build in my creative? Because if in the past we were looking to drop CPI and have a lot of scale, it meant that we can go with a leading creative and iterate on it until we will feel there is type of fatigue because we know this type of creative has lowered the CPI. Today, we need to level up a bit of sophistication and provide different users, maybe different stories, which means different concepts, and think about a story behind the creative and what motivation and what emotion do I want the user to feel, he will be more likely to click and then probably install my game. And a good user would be that one that will stay and will also pay for things inside the game. So this strategy is something that teams they really need to think of and build it and understand what would be the best way. If it's a clear strategy that you're building across all your games, or is it something that you need to adapt per game? Do you want your strategy to look at each channel? It depends on what are you capable of producing. Can you produce for each channel? It's a question. If yes, maybe it doesn't. It's a lot of exploration. And I think in a world where you have endless opportunities and endless things that you can think of in terms of strategy, it can be very confusing. You need to be very structured and organized in the way you're approaching it. I'm not saying there is one good way. The teams need to start thinking a bit more organized and not let's throw these tons of iterations to drop the CPI and will catch the one that dropped the CPI, and it will be very easy and very quick. Here, processes are becoming a bit more slower. How are you adapting to it? How are you tracking it? How are you learning from it and bringing this learning into the production team of creative to execute better?
If I understand correctly, that's been a very big shift because with hyper casual, it's been more you have a bouncy ball game and there can't be too much of a narrative in a bouncy ball game because you're looking for CPI versus when you're shifting to hybrid, it's much more depth. That's what I'm hearing you say. And you obviously have to look at different channels and you're optimizing for longer term ROAS, longer term retention rather than the immediate click and the immediate ROAS. That seems to be the biggest shift, it sounds like. I know you briefly touched on storytelling and how that drives performance. Can you share any examples of stories or narratives that you saw were led to massive improvement in performance?
In our creative team, we are trying to track as much as we can because it's not that easy to track a lot of creatives in different games and everything and have the data clear out from that. But we are trying to differentiate between those creatives that we are storytelling inside of them and there's a thought and there's a meta inside of those creatives to the other creatives that they're still not completely dead. I wanted to emphasize on that. The gameplay is still there and you can test and continue, iterate and test gameplays, which is also important for the process. But we're trying to compare to see what is the impact of us investing a lot in having that storytelling and investing in those creatives, in the visuals and assets and all the work and thinking and process versus those that are, we all know the gameplay, the fast iterations, those you add a timer, you add a text on top. And we have seen in general in our activity in Supersonic that those creatives that work with the storytelling has shown in most cases uplift of ROAS between 20 to 40% in some cases. In retention, we're seeing also uplifts of between 10 to 20% of results. And in IAP share as well, which is the most interesting part because this is end funnel. You're bringing those users. And if those users eventually are those that are paying, we're impacting the game from the creative, from the very start. And if we're seeing that in those storytelling creatives with the story is bringing 10 to 25% uplift in IA share, then it's a big thing. And this is what we're seeing. In specific, we do have some cases that, for example, if I'm trying to recall one, Trash Tycoon, one of our games that we published during the year, we had a lot of gameplay. It's a tycoon game and a lot of gameplay. And there's a lot of scenes inside the game. And one of the directions, suddenly the team decided to take it into a more emotional story and you need to clean the city, but cleaning you need to clean it trash and cleaning the city can go to a lot of different directions, factory or someone walking New York City. And they decided to go and take it to a different direction. And from the animal perspective of how trash is impacting those in the world, how is it disturbing for them and their fish swimming in that big sea with a lot of trash around, made feel and connect to that creative. And that creative drove immediately a share of spend, took 20% of the share of spend of the whole company. Wow. Which is very big when you're looking at a title and being one creative taking 20% of the shares on all geos. It was also proof of users of the story. They want to feel related. Those emotions make them feel more connected, more related to the game. It was a good case as well.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And you would think something like trash is a funny thing. It's almost hyper casual because it's like a bouncy ball funny thing. But clearly people resonate with a deeper narrative about animals and about keeping the city clean and stuff. And I think that's fascinating. And from that perspective, I would also imagine it's a big differentiator because if everyone is making stupid creatives, which are fake gameplay, clickbaity, and you have something deeper, then a lot of users, I can totally see why they would resonate with that. Switch gears a bit. Let's talk about AI in the workflow. Can you walk us through what your end-to-end creative workflow looks like, where AI fits in, what AI tools you use, where humans still add a lot of value? Because I would imagine something like the trash example you gave me, I think it's possible for AI to come up with something like that, but I would think the humans need to give a lot of guidance before the AI can do that? I would love to hear your perspective.
AI is in our processes from the first moment of ideating an idea for a creative, because I think most of the listeners here that will listen to us talking now has used Gemini and ChatGPT for even simple things that you're doing on your day to day. It helps us to think faster and working our time there. From the first moment that we're starting to think about the strategy, the AI comes in. If it's in the ideation, if it's writing the brief itself, it helps us shorten the time of writing, as we are also using it to write emails, to write letters. It helps us to do market research because there's a lot of data outside, and sometimes it's hard to come to a conclusion how easy it is to use the AI to help you put 2-3 outputs that are the most important ones that he finds from a report that you downloaded from some outsourced website that does market research. In production, it's creating those assets that in the past you were needing an artist, even a technical artist, if you need to implement it inside an HTML5 or all of those things, creating assets that in the past would take you a few days or specific skill. Today, you can do it easily. If it's creating this theme of animals, the fish swimming inside, full of garbage and filthy and very sad, this is very cinematic. If you tell me 2 years ago that we would create this type of creative, I would laugh and say, no way, it's not there. It's not worth for me to hold an artist and to do these motion stuff for the game. And here they doing it, but with AI. If it's creating voiceovers, you just see short hooks that we're trying to pull the attention of the user at the beginning and creating those short things that will catch their eye when they're scrolling, thing that everyone is doing, and you need them to stop. The thumb stopping part is the most important part for you as a advertiser. It comes in all the process, and the thing is that the humans are there for the judgment and the direction, because the AI will not judge the things he is doing and will not look into where is this ad going to run. Can it offensive? Is it standing in the rules of a specific channel? Is it maybe taking it to a complete direction that is a bit more, let's say, fake gameplay, which I don't want to take it. The AI can't go there. And I don't want, as a strategy of a creative strategist, I know that this is not my time to do a fake gameplay ad. I need to stop that direction and direct him better and tell him to redo his ideation or brief or whatever. The assets, the AI doesn't have taste in creating something, but sometimes the colors are not that good or are not related to the game itself. We need to their work. The humans are there to be the judgment, all this crazy things. I mean, it's time consuming. It's not something that sometimes it can be easy, but sometimes it's a bit hard to bring him back. You need to learn how to do it with him, and it's also a skill.
You're right, because it's easy to overestimate how much AI can do. But you're right that being the human is a very important skill, and you need that judgment, you need that taste to make sure AI gets good output, good results, and you can't let AI go crazy and go wild. That's very critical. To switch gears a bit, you guys are using AI for ideation, for design, along with your human teams. Once an ad is made, it goes into testing, and testing has its own challenges. Can you talk about what some of the challenges are with testing that you're noticing, and what your team's process for deciding when a creative has proven itself?
Testing. We need to breathe. Testing is something that is still in the process of understanding how to work better with the evolving and changing creative strategy that we're seeing happening in the gaming industry. Because the creative success today isn't CPI, as I mentioned before. When it was, and it was very easy out here because everyone in the industry did it. They took all their creatives, tested them on Meta campaign, looked for the CPI that dropped and apply it on the rest of your channels, campaigns. And usually it would have a good results across the whole other channels. The one that dropped the most, or maybe the top 3 that dropped, probably would be catching in other channels and other campaigns. But it's not the case anymore. And as I said, we're looking for more depth. And then the test becomes a bit more complex, because if you want to understand the depth of your creative, you need more budget, you need more time, and you need more volume, obviously, because you don't want to test for 60 days. It doesn't make sense. and you still want to produce because you feel that with those new creatives being added to the campaigns and you cannot let them wait and fade for 2 weeks, 3 weeks without adding any new creative. Then there's this balance that you need to do. How much am I willing to spend on new creatives that I don't know how they will impact my overall performance? And maybe they can lower my overall ROAS I'm driving and then harm my UA strategy. Or on the other hand, I'm still relying mostly on CPI and hoping for the best. It's a balance that you need to find between both of them. And because we're in a world where channels, we have a lot of channels, and each channel is, you're seeing it in the last year, 2 years, everyone is trying to improve their algorithms. All the algorithms are being spoken a lot, and you can throw 10, 20, 30 creatives, the algorithm will do the work. This is where they're trying to go, that you will not need to test. And I'm going with this flow and I'm going with this direction because we're in a world with AI, and it makes sense that someone will need to decide quickly for us in a world with full of creatives, and we need to trust something because you cannot control everything. But what I do think, and I said it on the beginning, is that you need to strategize and organize your strategy so you can track it. It means that you're looking for that depth, but you cannot waste a lot of money on it or time. But choose your top 2, 3 channels. Focus on them and then apply it on the rest. Don't use one channel to, as we did in the past, to apply all channels, because there's no one truth. And then you're missing opportunities and probably missing some creatives that can be diversified in your campaigns. Even if it's not going to be a top creative, but it's driving good ROAS and probably specific users, you want this creative in your campaign or to miss it. This is not a creative that dropped the CPI completely. It's maybe a bit more expensive, but the ROAS is good. It's not that much, but it is driving good users and good return. You do want this creative. So you need to read your risks and not plan it on one channel and see how you are strategizing it according to your game. If my game has the top 2 channels is A and B, I'll focus on A and B and invest my money and time in testing there and not on others because it's not worth it probably.
I agree. There's complexity you have to deal with, especially when you're on multiple channels. You said with CPI, it was, hey, lower CPI and that is it. Now, look, the CPI is probably higher, maybe the ROAS is higher, and maybe something's winning on one channel, maybe something winning on a different one. And speaking of channels, specifically, I know you guys are on SDK networks and social channels, and obviously they behave very differently when you're testing creatives. How does that impact the production cadence and the testing cadence across your team?
SDK, forever, it was the playable platform, which is making the biggest difference between the SDK channels to the, if we're talking creative, between the SDK and the social channels. If you don't have a playable, you're missing a big incrementality in your strategy because a lot of it is relying on that playable for games. First of all, this is obvious and clear, I assume, for most of the people today that what you're running on SDK, you need that playable to run those mix and matches of playable and videos together. And that's about that. To go a bit more deeper in terms of how do I strategize my creative, except for the type of it, SDK is slower in the reaction to a new creative. And we'll understand it. It's slower than social. In social, I do expect to understand in a week, max 2 weeks, the direction where a creative is going. It's not very common to see a creative on social picking up after 1 or 2 months. But on SDK, you can see those cases. This is what's a bit tricky and can be confusing when you're optimizing. And again, I don't have a clear answer of what should you do in order to do it right or not. But you need to remember that the SDKs are slower. So when do I upload new creatives? Okay, is a question. How much volume do you have in your campaigns of SDK? How much budgets are you willing to put on a campaign where you're adding new creatives to? Are you willing to add a new creative to a main campaign that is spending without even testing it before? It's also a question of risk. How much are you willing to risk your title, your UA strategy? And again, it depends on the SDK channel because some channels you'll be a bit more confident to upload these new creatives by knowing that the algorithm will kill those that probably will not drive the KPIs you're optimizing for. So if your campaign is optimizing for ROAS day 7 or ROAS day 30, 28, whatever, you need to learn those channels. You need to understand how they work in order to trust them or not trust them, and then play with that. And again, your budgets, this is important. And compared to social, with creatives is a bit more, I always called it, even in hyper casual and today, it's the heartbeat. If you're not inserting new blood to the campaigns, you will see much quicker on social the fatigue. You will start seeing the top creatives starting to, those raps are starting to sink down slowly, and no one knows how to explain it. And on social, the impact of that new blood and new creative is very big. And it's very important to keep those coming in. So even if it's an iteration or taking the top creative and doing a different voiceover, adding some different text on it or stuff that it's needed. While on SDK, I'm not sure that it will give you any impact if you upload all these iterations every week.
100%. So with SDK, I agree, it's less sensitive to volume, and which brings me to the next question. And then your team's 100 ads a month. How do you decide how many to produce, how many completely new concepts, how many versions of each, and also how many go into each channel? Is there a rule of thumb that you use? How does it create volume relate to actual budgets that you have?
In the past, I'll talk about the past and then how is it today, because we started from the transformation that we're going through in the industry. In the past, it was a rule of thumb. You had hyper casual, you're producing every week X amount of videos, iterations, you have the winner. It was very easy. You upload all those iterations and videos to testing, and from there, those are dropped CPI, go to main campaigns. Quite easy. And here, when we're looking into depth and we talked about how we're testing and looking at your top channels and applying from there, and don't waste all your budgets and all the channels for new creatives. Here we are taking it case by case, and each game has its own strategy. And the creative producer in our team is working together with the growth manager of each title in order to understand what's the need of the game right now. Is my top channels including social or not? What am I focusing on? If I have a top channel, which is SDK, I need to add another, maybe interactive, a playable, whatever, to add another new interactive blood into the campaigns. If it's social, I know that every week I would like to have a few new creatives because this is the need of the social UA. And by that, they build together the strategy every week for every game. And by that, they plan how many creatives should I build or not. Am I iterating this week? Because last week we found a new hero in the campaigns. So we don't need to look for that new concept this week. I will take that new hero I found last week and I can iterate on it because the fatigue is still not here. And I can squeeze the lemon a bit more by taking that concept and squeezing it more and taking it another tweak in the direction and another tweak for another direction, but still keeping that concept, the core of the creative. And this is how he's taking the need of the UA, which is coming from the growth manager, implementing it internally into the creative strategy that he's building for the next week, for the next 2 weeks, sometimes even 3 weeks ahead. Depends on what the title is running on. If it's mostly SDKs, it will look different than a title that is probably more likely to work on socials.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's very iterative and you're building on previous week's learnings going into the coming weeks.
Yeah.
And that's what helps you unlock.
It's a constant circle of taking the previous data, analyzing it, understanding the UA goals and needs for the next week or 2 weeks. What are we optimizing for? And then taking it into the strategy and building it every week, every 2 weeks.
That's interesting. And I'm curious, something I'm very curious about is how the team structure is that enables a lot of this, because I would imagine the creative producers aren't always plugged into performance metrics. What does the interaction look like between the producers or the creative strategists and the growth marketers who are actually doing the campaign management? What does the interaction look like?
I think the biggest interaction that these two functions has in Supersonic is this constant updating on the status of a game and the need of the game in terms of UA. Because if, for example, we feel that we need to push a bit more for mass installs right now because we need more volume to understand and bring a wide diversity of users, it doesn't matter which users, then we're aiming to maybe buy lower CPIs. In the creative, they need to take this goal this week and say, I need to drop CPI. Let me go back to my experience in hyper casual. I know how to do it. I know where, in order to do a creative that they will drop CPI, be talk to more users and a wider range of users, and then be very scalable in a campaign. This interaction between them is what is building. It has to be very harmonic. Yes. And very supportive of each other. Because if there's a strategy in creative, for example, that was built and we did two new concepts that we truly believe are the right direction, either we took previous data or we took data from the market. We went and did a market research and then we saw a crazy trend going on and then we applied it on one of the creatives we've built. The growth manager needs to trust the creative that this direction is a direction we need to test and feel confident to take that creative and upload it not only to a test campaign on Meta, because we said we're not only there. We need to get a bit more information on creatives that we are like building in a wider range and deeper strategy, and take that creative and take it to the second biggest channel, to one of the campaigns, and let it run. And let's see if it's not only the CPI that I'm looking, maybe the ROAS looks better, maybe the retention looks better, maybe I'm bringing good IAP users. It needs trust. We're not looking to spend money out of nowhere and without results. It needs to be tracked. They need to communicate well on that. If the UA feels it's going to a bad direction, they need to communicate, they need to talk. The creative can take the creative and iterate on it to try and understand what didn't work or how can I iterate to improve retention, improve the CPI a bit. And this is constant communication between them. If there's no communication, it will not work. The producer will do whatever he thinks is good. He'll go with either crazy directions, market directions. That's it. Growth manager will say a new concept. I don't know. I'm not feeling confident to put it on my campaigns right now. I'm not open for optimization this week or not next week. But he didn't communicate it to producers. It will be unbalanced and it won't serve the goal that we're all here for. And is it to build creatives that drive performance and hopefully bring incrementality to the game.
And from everything you're saying, it's also critical that the growth marketer understand what's being tested and why. It sounds because they need to buy in order to make sure the ad gets enough exposure, and the producer needs to understand what's happening in the campaign. And I think that's a two-way street, and it's not the easiest thing to achieve, I would imagine. And switch gears a bit again. I understand your producers work with multiple AI tools, different AI tools. How does your team decide, let's work on a BC tool, let's use Kling for this, let's use Sora for this? Or is it completely left to the producer? How is that generally structured?
I think that in a world of AI, in creative AI, it can be very confusing because I think every week there's a new tool of AI comes out, or a new version, say Nano Banana, all that. It's getting very confusing and you don't know where to focus or what do you need. In general, we are trying in the management, when I'm managing this team, to keep it a bit focused. We know the things that we need to have inside our team. We want to have good directions and tools that will give us good directions. We want voiceovers. We need assets. We need some short video productions to use for hooks. There's a list of what do we need, and this is where we're getting this from the field, from the people that are producing and understanding these things. And then we're trying to explore different tools. We're trying to have a diversity. Of course, we are not having duplicates of tools that are doing the same, but trying to come up with specific tools for each need that is coming up. And the producer will then decide what direction they want to take the creative itself. And they have this box of tools that they can go and decide whatever they want. Because I mentioned before, if you would tell me 2 years ago that I will make going in a sea, seeing trash, being sad, very cinematic, I would say no way. But today they don't have limits. They can go with any direction they would like to. And we want to provide them the tools to be able to do that and not feel they're limited in some way. Because with all we're seeing in the industry with AI creatives in the market, we want to have it all as an option and to be able to build everything. Them as creative strategists need to optimize themselves, their work, to
Right.
understand when is the right time to use a specific tool. Probably I'm not gonna do week after week a cinematic creative. Probably I'm not gonna use the same voice over and over again with each creative I'm doing. And they need to see that they're diversifying their work and using the right tools. They can also say, listen, I found the best voice. It always works for me. It's fine. If data
Mhm.
proves it, then it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
We're going data eventually. I don't care. If it works
Mhm.
only since eventually and you're proving it with the data, then yours, that's the job. And this is what we want to allow with this like freedom of choosing what tool do you want, what strategy do you think you're supposed to go with.
I think it makes sense as long as they're justifying it with data.
It's all
You know,
data.
it comes down to data, but it comes down to their storytelling, their narrative, their strategy, because ultimately that's what drives the data. Jumping back to something we were talking about earlier, right? You said, look, you still need a human in the mix for a lot of things, for taste and judgment. Right? Now, when I talk to people about things that AI can't do, one of the things that comes up is, look, you still have your gameplay assets. AI can't generate AI assets. Are there ways that you and your team work with AI, game assets with AI that hopefully short circuits some of the production process? Or do you feel that still needs to be very manually done?
Things are improving. I can say
Yeah.
something now and then in 2 weeks it will not be relevant anymore. I'm trying to be careful when I'm
Yeah.
talking about AI. I don't want to say there's no solution right now. I learned from my mistakes. There are tools that we're starting to see being able to mimic your kind of environment of the game or take an asset and ask him to do things that are similar. Maybe if I have a monster in my game and I want to make an animal that fits the environment or the look-alike of the game, we are seeing things that are starting to be a bit more in that direction. But still, this judgment is very, very in place for gameplay. For that, what can a character do or not do in terms of even physics is something AI cannot always control. Did it throw it and it looks reasonable because I don't want it to look weird? Did the gameplay went as it is, or did the AI mishmash something and made it look weird? So the judgment here is important. And with today, taking a gameplay that is not very complex and having that gameplay for creators is very easy. So I assume that it's still not there to, AI is not there to replace the way teams are getting game assets. If you're for example, it's very quick and easy. I'm not sure that still there is a tool that can make it quicker. And if it is not doing it easier or quicker, then what's the point? It's still not there. I assume probably there will be a point where you're throwing your game link and it can go ahead and export for you level 200 and something.
If you hear a lot of communications from Meta, they claim that's where the world's going. They'll give us a link, we will extract the assets, we will figure out what kind of ads to make. They want to own the process end to end. That's exciting or intimidating, depending on how you look at it.
I think judgment will not be eliminated ever, though. I hope so.
I hope so. And I feel a little bit more optimistic because Meta has been talking about automation for the last 7, 8 years. Look, we use Advantage Plus, use Advantage Plus budget, Advantage Plus research and whatnot, and it's still not perfect. And you still need judgment. At least in my experience, I don't know if you've seen differently. In my experience, using a lot of the automation is very risky, trusting it completely, even today. And so if you AI gets more advanced, are you comfortable giving the keys to the car to the AI? I don't know at this point.
It will be interesting in the next year, 2, 3, to see where we'll go because I want to believe judgment will still be the key factor to make it perfect.
Indeed. And again, speaking of how AI impacts our work, our jobs, how has AI impacted resourcing on your team? You mentioned in the preparation for this call that AI has helped you maintain your output without growing headcount. How do you think this changes the kinds of skills of creative teams in the future?
I think the obvious is saying AI, if it's not efficient, then what's the point of using it? As I mentioned, efficiency is one of the first thing that AI is coming to create for us in the world, I assume. And then it's exactly what you mentioned that we talked about before. To create that fish swimming in the sea, I needed 2-3 years ago an artist, okay, that is working on animations as well. We have two skills here, and I don't need it today. So I didn't recruit anyone with skills. That's the efficiency we are talking about. I am doing more and not growing my headcount or skills in the team and being able to do things I haven't been done before. This is one. And I think that also maintaining this scale, but deepening your creative without growing your headcount is saying a lot as well. You're reaching more. You're creating more work in creatives, you're making it more deep. The people working on it today are investing a lot of time in that, creating that story, creating that the storyboard they got from the producer, and now they need to make it visual. It's more work than in the past. Record a gameplay, add the timer at the top or the IQ, or they're working more deep. It takes more time, and we didn't grow in headcount. This is the efficiency that AI is impacting on our resourcing of skills, headcounts, and all of that. Where it will go, as I said, I hope judgment will still be a big factor in this process, not to eliminate it completely. I don't believe it will be eliminated completely, but it will continue to impact creative teams, that they will be able to do more with less.
And I think that also mirrors my experience on our team. We've seen that we haven't had to reduce the size of a creative team post AI, but what we've seen is the output per designer has gone up dramatically. In many cases, I would say 5 to 10x, the output has gone up. The number of assets they can produce, the number of very good assets that they can produce has gone up massively, and which I think aligns with the point you made. People can do more, people can be more productive, and I think AI can be a huge enabler from that perspective.
Completely. Yeah, we're seeing it the same in graphics, in assets, in motions.
And this has been incredibly in depth, and there's a lot of notes from this interview that I'm going to come back to and revisit. And before we wrap, could you tell us more about how people can find out more about you and everything you do?
Sure. In general, I'm leading the creative growth in Supersonic, which means basically that leading the creative teams, the strategy of it, and how is it connecting to our growth strategies, together with leading the social UA activity. So social is very connected to creatives and has a very big impact, but I'm trying to lead those two teams in parallel and connect them where there is a very strong connection there in Supersonic, to make sure all the business is very aligned and in a very fluent work together and collaboration between those teams together. And in general, you can find my activities and things I'm speaking and saying out there on LinkedIn. Ping me, talk to me.
Excellent. Link to your details in the show notes. This is perhaps a good place for us to wrap. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.